living for the night, playing for the soul. I'm Stuart from Daylight Productions and Daylight Vampires, and this is Interview with a Vampire. I'm here tonight with Phil Peters. We're actually in this thing which I'm calling Bass in the Basement, as he's surrounded by his basses, his excitement and what drives him and gives him that low end every single time he comes downstairs. Hey, Phil, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent. How you doing?
Excellent, thank you. Great to have you here tonight. It's St. Paddy's, so we have a little bit of our Irish whiskey getting going over here to start off the night. So happy St. Paddy's to everybody. So Phil, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I've been playing bass since I'm, I guess, 15 or 16. And it was, typically there's two paths to bass. One, you're a guitar player, or two, there's already guitar players and nobody plays bass, so you get voted in as the guy who plays bass. So I was the latter, and I had a bunch of friends and we put together a band. We were called the Famous Amos Band, and we were playing blues rock, and we practiced in Old Montreal. We had a few gigs in that, and I'm still friends with all the guys from that band, but they're scattered all over the country. We have reunions every couple of years, and I played bass for music for, I guess, into my early mid-20s, and I stopped until my daughter was about 15 years old. It was about 1998, and I just got started playing bass again, and you know, I didn't even own a bass when I started again. I bought one, and I've just kept going and playing in more bands, more styles of music, and accumulating more basses because I just love bass.
Well, I think also music was always your passion. You know,
Oh, yeah.
the way you started off also with record stores.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me a bit about that.
So actually, when I left university, I went to work in my first record store. Was Sam the Record Man franchise in Place Vertu. I ended up opening Sam the Record Man, worked for A&A, I worked for Discus, I managed stores. I did buying, retail, distribution wholesale, and I love music, and I've always accumulated a lot of music. I still buy physical product because I'd rather curate my own algorithms. I don't want Spotify or whoever to do it. You know, I get to choose every day, and I've got a CD player, an outboard one I still bought for my car, and I still play my own music, and I'm kind of omnivorous. There's not one style of music that I focus on. I just like music.
Now, while I'm sitting here, and I will show some videos a little later on this, but we do have what I call the wall of CDs.
Yeah.
Phil, as he mentioned, he's been buying CDs all the time, and because of that, you can actually see all the styles and everything around us, the type of music that he likes to listen to, and continuously going in the stores, as he mentioned, to purchase the CDs. Did you have the same thing with albums as well?
Oh yeah, I had a huge album collection. Still have some, but I ended up selling it at one point to buy a 1966 Fender Precision bass. I didn't have the cash for it. I really wanted it, and eventually I ended up selling that and a bunch of other basses to get a 1954, which was third year of production of the Fender bass. And so there went my vinyl, but I still buy some vinyl, but I still buy a lot of CDs.
You know, talking about bass and, you know, playing the music and everything, and as I mentioned, we're surrounded by bass over here. If you talk about a bass itself, what is the difference between the bass guitars? Because you have so many of them. What is it? A tone difference? Is it a feel difference?
It's all of that. I mean, there was, people talk about an early invention of an electric bass in the 1940s, but it got nowhere. There were a few built, they didn't, but it was Leo Fender in 1951 who after the Telecaster, he invented the Telecaster guitar. He invented the Fender bass, and he called it the Precision because it wasn't like an upright where you had no frets. This had frets, so you could be precise. And the idea was that it made it easier for people to play bass without having to drag around a big upright. And so that was the first. And they've evolved over the years, and there's so many different kinds. But you have, the original was a 34-inch scale. And then there are short scale basses. Gibson made 30-inch. There's a medium scale that's 32-inch. So they all have different tones. You can put flat wound strings or round wound strings. You can slap on them, which is a whole different kind of sound and comes in funk music. Listen to somebody like Jaco Pastorius, who made it almost like a lead instrument. But my idols are those people too, but it's the people, I always wanted to be a sideman. I have no interest in being the front guy. I'm not that personality, but I want to support. It's what I do. And I want to be able to support in all different styles of music. So it kind of calls for different instruments. You could conceivably do it with one, but since I have the means, where's the fun in that? I can get different basses that do different things.
I also see you have mostly 4-string basses.
Yeah, I have one 5-string, and that's because I played in a band where the singer, because of his vocal range, he sang in odd keys. So the 4-string became a pain with playing with him. So that's when I needed a 5-string. But I really do prefer a 4-string. In 19 out of 20 scenarios, the 4-string does it for me.
Now, aside from the guitars itself, the bass guitars itself, tell me a little bit about the amplification that you use.
When I go gig, and I play in about 4 or 5 different bands at any given time, because I just like to play. I mean, if one band were really busy, I might, but I like the variety of styles too. But when I gig, I like lightweight, reliable equipment, and I've got cabinets that are modular that I can stack one on top of another for smaller or bigger gigs, and I've got a tube DI direct input, which means I can warm up the sound of the transistor amplifiers, the solid state amplifiers, but at home, and if I had the luxury of having people to help me carry around equipment, I've got tube amps just sound, like they sound like dark chocolate. They sound like rich 80% dark chocolate. And the ones I gig with don't sound like that. They sound more like a caramel or a dairy milk bar. And they work for a gig because you've got drums, you've got different rooms. They're all, the sound has so many variables. But if I were recording or in my home where I can control things, I'd way prefer these old tube amps. They're so cool. They just sound so good.
I like the way you compared the chocolate of, looking at the tube amp versus the solid state, because myself also being a guitar player, and majority of my amps are tube driven, it gives a certain warmth.
Yeah.
You actually, once the tubes warm up itself, it actually allows, you feel the driving. It's like the way the bass hits you in the chest. It's the same feeling also with the tubes. I find when you're using a tube, it actually, as the warmth comes and they warm up, it hits you more. You have more control over your tonality. You have more control over the way you play, and you actually feel it. I find when I play with a tube, you feel it more.
Yeah.
And there's, and especially for guitar players who use, we use pedals, we use things to push more of the tube itself. When you're pushing it, it allows the tube to actually do even more to it, and to really take the sound to the next level, which I find is quite impressive and really works extremely well. I listen to different types of songs, also music over the years, and you have different people, and you mentioned slapping of bass and different styles of bass, like it brings to mind like bands like Primus.
Yeah.
And you listen to Les Claypool, and he's like the king of slap. This
yes.
guy is just, have you ever seen them play?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love Primus. I watched this live concert they did for the 25th anniversary of South Park, and Primus do the theme music for South Park, and a lot of the concert was Primus playing along with it. It was so, and he's got a great sense of humor too. My daughter and I always quote songs like Too Many Puppies and Pudding Time. I mean, it's part of our daily lives. I love Primus.
Yeah, I find they're a band that is, as you mentioned, that when you put them on, you hear them for the first time, you're like, what is this? Like Tommy the Cat and all these kind of things. It's more rap and spoken word than anything else, and yet at the end of the day, it's got such an incredible beat to it and gets you going. I find that quite extremely impressive. It's the same way that sometimes like things like even the Chili Peppers, when you hear Flea play, it's he has a certain style as well. I find he has a slap pick every single time that he plays.
What I think it is, What I feel I like in music is authenticity. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with pop music because pop music makes a lot of people happy, but it's manufactured in a very different way. But if you look at somebody like Les Claypool from Primus or Flea or any of the music I really like, it's not manufactured, it's authentic. It's their own self-expression. And that's what really, you know, that's what I feel and what I appreciate.
That's what I find the most beautiful part about music is as well. You know, and especially after going through and meeting various people and talking to various people over the past, you know, 2 months now, is that we all share that same language. We all share that same love for music. It's a certain appreciation of just closing your eyes when you're listening to it and drifting off. And when you play it, it's euphoric.
Yeah.
You sit there, you play, no matter what might be in your mind at the time, no matter what might be going on, you completely forget about that and you just concentrate on what's going on. And you concentrate on your groove with your band and with the audience in the front as you look out front and you see how you're playing and how people are moving, you know, and like, you know, being the singer and I look out front and when I feel the bass because, you know, you're right behind it and it hits you and you look at the people in the front and when they're moving their heads and moving everything, you can actually feel that they're moving with the bass player. You know, they have the drummer, which they feel that as it's going through, but the bass player, you could see that they're actually following the beat of the bass. I find that to be quite incredible when I've, you know, experienced that. Now, you mentioned many bands that you played with, and, you know, it's one thing Phil does play along with the Daylight Vampires as well. We've done many gigs together.
Always fun.
You know, we've played with the... also with the Bob Dylan band together as well, which was a lot of fun as well. But tell me about the other bands you play with.
When I started playing again in '98, one of my friends that I work with to this day referred me to these guys who had a punk band, needed a bass player. They were called Brain Size 61. They're still around. But I didn't last that long. It wasn't music that I could relate to at the time. And this guy I knew was playing bass with Deacon George, who's a blues player around Montreal, and he didn't love blues, but I do. And he said, you know, Phil, I shouldn't be doing this. You should be playing with George. And I still play with him to this day. If George has a band and he plays a lot solo, I'm his bass player. I know all his repertoire. We have a show coming up in May. We won't do more than 1 or 2 shows per year, but it's always fun. I've played in a few different repertoire bands, 3 different Rolling Stones tribute bands. I'm in one currently, Nasty Habits. I love that music. I've done Bob Dylan, we did for a while. I had another one before that with Ian Hanchett and a few other people. That was fun. It's great. I like the songs. I do a Leonard Cohen project with a guy named Jerry Torres. And oh yeah, and I'm in a new band, which is New Orleans rhythm and blues thing called Dragged Over Coals.
That's with Dave Lyons, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun. I love that kind of music. The more different styles I can play, the whole idea for me is I don't consider myself a chops player, but I like to play for the song. And the more styles I play in, I think the better I get. My idols are like the session players. And, you know, I don't do a lot of recording. I do a bit of it. But I like to be like them. If you know, Pino Palladino can play with The Who, or he can play with D'Angelo, or John Mayer, he can play with anybody and find a way to fit in and not play for himself, but express himself within that band's context. And that's what I want to do.
You know, it's impressive because, you know, you mentioned a lot of these players, and, you know, for the people who are listening to this and watching this, a lot of these players are staples in Montreal. They have been playing in Montreal for numerous amounts of years. They play in bars and restaurants throughout the city. They are icons. You know, they're Montreal icons. And I always say, if you have an opportunity, definitely go out and see any of these bands and see them. I went to see Nasty Habits a few weeks back, and it was just incredible. It really was a great time. You even have people like, for example, Hurricane Jane.
Yeah.
You know, Jane LaCour is actually in this, and, you know, she sings the backup and she plays a bit of guitar, and she, you know, there's a lot of bands in Montreal I find that become very intertwined. And it's amazing. You know, that's how we got together, was that through the Bob Dylan band, I needed a bass player. And then all of a sudden you were there and you started off, and then you became, you know, regular with the Vampires. And but everybody just keeps going along like that in Montreal. I find the Montreal music scene really works well together.
Yeah.
You know, they get along. It's an amazing respect that everybody has for everyone. And I think that's what really makes the difference. And if you're one of those people that go out there and have a good time, people want to play with you. You know, they don't want to play with somebody who's always complaining and everything is wrong and everything is this. They like to play with people who enjoy their craft, who make sure when they show up for the event that they're ready to play, that they know their stuff, that it's not, you know, you're practicing before you even start to think, because you're not even sure the way it is. And I think that's something which is very important. And, you know, you are proof to that, because, you know, with all the bands, and you're in demand every single time. Someone's saying to me, you know, is Phil free if he's not playing with the Vampires, because we might need him one time or another. I think you've also played, have you played also with George Papaphilis?
Yeah, well, I play with George, and I'll be playing it starting up again, not in his regular bands, because he's got one called Papa Sons and a few things like that. But there's a guy named Diego Ganji who's a really cool guy, and he started a jam, and it was an Italian restaurant on Saint Laurent in Little Italy, and I was playing with George. I was the regular bass player. George ran the jam, and they would occasionally have a designated drummer. But it was a blast to play with George, and it's a blast to play those jam nights, because I don't typically go to a lot of jams, because if you're going as a guest, you get to play for 15 minutes and you're off. But if you're part of the house band, if there's a lot of bass players, I'm not going to play much. But if there aren't, I could end up playing most of the night, which has happened. And then I get to play with all these different drummers and all these different guitar players and harmonica players and whatever. And George in particular is a really smart guy about running a jam. He knows how to make sure the material is not too complicated. It's something somebody can come up cold on stage with and be able to find their way around, as long as they have a reasonable level of skill. And I kind of like the challenge of not knowing what song I'm going to play. There's no set list. So, you know, somebody's going to say, okay, let's play Born to Be Wild. Well, I can play Born to Be Wild. Or, you know, they're going to, you know, one time I remember somebody said, do you know Hot Stuff? And I thought they meant the Stone song Hot Stuff. I said, sure, I could play that. I play any Stone song.
Donna Summer?
And it turned out to be Donna Summer. But it was okay, because it's not that hard a song. And as soon as I realized what they were doing, I figured it out. And it was fun, because it's a good song.
For George, the reason why I know him is a friend of mine, actually, who actually started me playing music when I was 50 years old. He started me on, you know, with his band, Avram Schuster. He played with George, and he always told me, he says, George has the softest hands when he plays. It's like he's got a touch, which is just, it's so light and so easy to play with him, because he's not really going in there to dig in, but his phrasing and everything is just so beautiful. So that's why, like, you know, these are certain people which I haven't had the opportunity to play with, and you have. Now, when we're talking about people that you've played with, have you ever played with anybody that has, like, at that next level?
Yes, but only because for a few years and in a couple of different bands, I was playing the Maimonides Battle of the Bands thing. And so I did that with a group called Here's Johnny, and I did that with a group called the Sofa Kings. Neither one of those bands are still participating in that. Various people are in different bands, but, you know, they would have guest stars every year. So I played with and been on stage with Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo, and Don Felder from the Eagles, and Peter Noon from Herman's Hermits, and Tito Jackson from the Jackson 5. So I played with those people in a one-off situation, and it was kind of fun. You know, I'm kind of lucky in a way that whatever is in your head that causes you to have stage fright or whatever, I don't have that. I just don't. So I don't get fazed by that kind of thing. It doesn't make me nervous. If I'm recording, which I did recently with Dragged Over Coals, I don't have what they call red light fever, which is when that red recording light comes on, some people freeze. It's all the same to me. but it was learning experiences. I remember Jim Cuddy giving a vocalist in one of the bands who apologized for taking too long, or goes, I hope I'm not boring you. And Jim Cuddy turns to him and says, never tell your audience that you're boring them. And that was great advice, you know.
These are the kind of things, those are the moments, having the opportunity. These are the things that people dream about, that they get to play with a superstar, and you look, and those are superstars, you're looking at bands, Jackson 5, you're looking at the Eagles, you're looking at Blue Rodeo. These are big bands that, that really have been out there, Herman's Hermits, these are big things, and people paid over the years, and you get to be on the stage with these guys, and that's something which is extremely extremely impressive with that. If you're looking at your top basses that you have here, what would you say? Well, you have one right here. Tell me a little bit about the one you have right here.
So this bass is a 1968 Ampeg AMUB1. A lot of numbers and letters there, but effectively, this is kind of cool because this is the bass that Rick Danko from the band used to use, Boz Burrell from Bad Company. And it was the first interesting bass. I used to go to this music store that closed a couple of years ago called Kit's Music. Mm-hmm. I used to like to hang out there. The owner was a really cool guy, Tony Greco. And one day I happened to be in the store, and this woman had come in. Her brother, who was a session bassist in Philadelphia, had passed away, and she got his basses. And he had this bass and an upright, a beautiful old upright. And I told Tony, it was just so neat to look at. I said, whatever you decide you're going to sell this for, I want to buy it. So I had to give him a couple of days to figure out the value, and I was nervous that somebody else would buy it out from under me, but it didn't happen, and I got it. But after that, we were talking about Fender basses are the gold standard. If you go into a studio, they want to see a Fender Precision or a jazz bass because they know what it's going to sound like. But when I got this, and it has a really cool sound and feel and look, that's what got me started in thinking about what different basses can do. And that's how I got started looking at different things. But I found some cool basses from kits, and I bought online, and I bought from privately. I still spend too much time on Facebook Marketplace.
You know what? It's incredible. Anyhow, thank you very much for your time. Like I said, this has just been incredible. Like I said, Bass in the Basement is actually the true statement for this kind of thing. Well, thanks a lot, Phil. Appreciate everything.
My pleasure. And just as a by the way, you were talking about the people I've played with, big names, but also big stages. We've played on some nice festival stages, and that's a blast to get up on the large stage and to look down like that on crowds. And I appreciate that. That's a blast.
Excellent. Well, thanks again. Once again, Stuart with Daylight Productions, and we'll see you next time.